If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat while Julian shows his presentation. By the way, my name's Holly Tran. I am the Vice Chair for ERAC Committee. Sorry I didn't introduce myself at first. Thanks for joining us. Julian, whenever you're ready.
All right, sounds good. Let me just get this set up here on my end. Let me do one other thing. Hang on one second. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Let me reshare. All right. So thank you everybody for joining. Let me get my cursor out of the way there. I'm not going to do the professor thing where it's on the screen the entire time. So yeah, this is a presentation on artificial intelligence in education, presented by myself. Oh, I have to be in there to do that. And so, like I said a few minutes ago, and for those who've just joined, this is basically going to flow in three parts. There's going to be a basic introduction to artificial intelligence in general, just conceptually. Let me fix my webcam. Just some basic concepts and ideas. And then we'll go through some more fun examples of how it's used, to be some interactive things where we ask for some input. And then the last part will be the title of the presentation, where it actually can be applied to education, and be discussing common areas and categories where that's currently happening. It won't be all encompassing because there's a lot of different areas in which education may be affected by AI, but these are some of the most prominent and things that are happening right now. So first, just a little bit real quick about myself, so you know who's talking. I'm Julian Snow. I've been a staff member at Lehigh for about 60 years in enrollment management services. I'm an undergraduate systems specialist, so primarily support the systems for the student life cycle for undergrad. I'm also the manager of the data imports team. So any bulk uploads from external vendors, my team primarily handles. And then I'm also a student in the TLT PhD program, where obviously AI in education has been my area of interest for, I want to say, about a year and a half, 2 years now. So had a tiny head start on the AI craze over the last year with ChatGPT. And then let's actually get into the intro. So again, this is just a basic intro to the basic terms and concepts. So we'll start with the actual term of AI. I mean, I figure that makes the most sense, right? So artificial intelligence, the term itself, was originally coined in 1955 by a prominent computer scientist and one of the fathers of AI, obviously, John McCarthy. And he defined it as making a machine behave in ways that would be called intelligent if a human were so behaving. So this wasn't intended to be revolutionary. It was originally written for a proposal asking the Rockefeller Foundation for money. So it's not like it was out of some big, crazy, like amazing study or anything like that. It was literally just him throwing something together, and it looked like it was just kind of haphazardly thrown together. However, I personally feel that it is one of the best operational definitions for artificial intelligence, because when you read it, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it's when a machine does something that a human should be able to do. So it's that, you know, that higher order level of functioning and thought processing, traditionally found exclusively in humans until now. So one example of this that you're all probably already familiar with would be self-driving cars, right? We've all most likely heard of this already. But think about what they do. They take in elements of their surroundings and make real-time decisions based upon their information. It's not just a simple computer program. It actually requires a human level of intelligence, awareness, perception, decision-making, etc. So it's a 30-second video showing you what Tesla's cars basically see on, I don't remember what year this video is from, but you can notice all the different details once I hit play on here about the things that it's tracking. So we've got draw distance between objects, the little numbers. You've got object identification like the stop sign, path trajectory. You've got it identifying lanes in real time, looking for people. So all these kinds of things that you naturally do when you're driving that you don't really give a second thought to, but these are all things that are happening autonomously. It's determining speed, it's determining if it should stop, if it shouldn't stop, all of these real-time decisions. So that's what we mean when we're saying requires a human level of intelligence. So now, when people first start learning about AI, so I'm just adjusting my mic so it's closer to my face, they often get confused between machine learning and AI. That's probably another term that many of you have heard. And unless it's explicitly like explained, it's oftentimes difficult to understand the difference because they're used so interchangeably. Now, if you think of AI as like the parent at the very top, you know, the umbrella, whatever, machine learning is just one component. It's one sub part of AI. But a good way to think of it that I've always felt is that if artificial intelligence is the noun or the product or the actual algorithm, the thing doing, or the thing that is the end result, then machine learning is the verb or the process at how we are arriving at that output. And I'll give you some extra emphasis here to help you further understand. But Arthur Samuel, who was another prominent computer scientist in AI back in the 50s, coined the term machine learning, saying that it gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. So it's a great definition. But the thing is, did he really say that? So I'm going to go off on a mini tangent real quick because I like to do that. When we are looking at, and this has nothing to do with AI, but it's still important to talk about. When we are looking at any kind of research or any sort of quoting any sort of statistic, or you hear anything in a dinner conversation, or you scroll through your news feed and you see something, you look at a news article, it's really important to make sure that what is being talked about or cited is actually genuine. So that quote that I just showed you, that if you Google it, if you stop right now and Google Arthur Samuel machine learning definition, that's what's going to appear, but he never actually said that. It's prominent in many news articles and things online because it's got this whisper down the alley effect, essentially, where one person cites something, probably intending to do so in a paraphrasing sort of way from the original source at some point in time, and then the next person just copies them directly and cites that article, and so on and so forth. So that's how you end up with these sorts of situations, and it's really important when you're considering any factual thing, doesn't matter what the topic is, that you're really looking to make sure that the information is legitimate. So what he did say, because he did technically coin the term machine learning, that part is true, but he didn't say that snappy, easy to understand sentence. These are what he actually said in his 1959 paper. He said, a computer can be programmed so that it will learn to play a better game of checkers than can be played by the person who wrote the program. He also said, programming computers to learn from experiences should eventually eliminate the need for much of this detailed programming effort. So it's the same spirit or essence of the earlier quote. It's obviously more long-winded, but it's just important to always make sure that we're really citing the truth of any given source, regardless of the topic. So either way, that's the concept of machine learning and how it differs from AI. Again, machine learning is the process, it's the action, it's how the algorithms are actually learning to do what they do, whereas artificial intelligence is more of a general blanket term. So two more brief machine learning definitions for you from two different individuals who are kind of prominent in the AI ML world. One is Pedro Domingos, Professor Emeritus of Computer Science at the University of Washington. The other is Andrei Burkov, an author and machine learning leader. I have an asterisk next to Pedro Domingos's name for a simple reason. He is one of the most prominent leaders in the field. You will see his name pop up everywhere. He's very intelligent, very insightful. The asterisk is because I think it's also important to declare when somebody is sometimes out of line. And unfortunately, over the last year, he's been saying some rather misogynistic things online. So I don't agree with that. A lot of people don't agree with that, but I wanted to point that out and separate the idea that you can agree with someone on a professional level, but disagree with them on a personal level. So I will still be quoting him here, but it's disappointing to see people act in certain ways sometimes. But this quote is still very helpful in understanding the process and how it all kind of comes together. And this is from his book, The Master Algorithm, which I still recommend. It's still a good book. But Pedro says that in farming, we plant the seeds, make sure they have enough water and nutrients, and reap the grown crops. He says, why can't technology be more like this? It can, and that's the promise of machine learning. So learning algorithms are the seed, data is the soil, and the learned programs are the grown plants. The machine learning expert is like a farmer, sowing the seeds, irrigating and fertilizing the soil, and keeping an eye on the health of the crop, but otherwise staying out of the way. So it is a good analogy. It's a good way to help understand how it all kind of comes together. And then we have Andrei Burkov, who's the author of the 100-page machine learning manual, which is another great resource. Should anybody want to be getting more into this, it's a great place to start. And he said, this is a little bit more technical, but he said, machine learning can be defined as the process of solving a practical problem by 1, gathering a data set, and 2, algorithmically building a statistical model based on that data set. And then that statistical model is then assumed to be used somehow to solve the practical problem. So again, more technical, you don't need to worry about it. But the thing that we keep mentioning in passing here is data. I've said it several times. It was in several of the quotes. And there's this concept of big data. Maybe some of you have even heard of this term before and been confused, like what's the difference between big data and just regular data, right? So essentially, it's just a lot of data. But Bruce Schneier, who is the author of Data and Goliath, another great book on the topic. It's about like responsible usage of large pieces of information. It's a good read. But he's a computer scientist and author, obviously, and he defines big data as the general practice of amassing and saving all kinds of data. So again, it's a broad definition, but it's pretty accurate still. So big data is the soil from Pedro Domingos's quote from the previous slides. And it's how machine learning is able to learn by looking at lots and lots and lots of data. And then it searches for patterns that exist within that data. But with great power comes great responsibility. How much is too much? Who should have access to this data? Who shouldn't? And how can we protect it from the people who shouldn't have access? These are all modern day concerns of AI usage. And when you have these giant warehouses of data, it's real easy to lose track of them. So it's important to always keep the security considerations in mind as we move forward with this field. So here's an example of not just big data in action, but kind of everything that we just talked about. So as some of you may know, the standard recommendation for breast cancer screening is roughly every 1 to 2 years. Sorry, there's a gnat in my face. But this can clog up the system. So Tempo is an algorithm developed by MIT researchers, which outputs risk-based screening recommendations individualized to the person. So it provides personalized recommendations for when patients should have their next appointment. And it gives these recommendations in 6-month intervals, that's the word, between 6 months at the lowest end and 3 years at the highest end. And so it does this by comparing the individual's mammogram results to the results of a massive database, again, big data, of all those who came before. And then it looks for patterns between that individual and the big, data. So in theory, the more this algorithm is used, the better it should get. So Tempo was trained on a large data set from Massachusetts General Hospital and then tested with real patients. And the results showed that Tempo improved early detection rates while simultaneously reducing the total number of scans by 25%. So this is big because it means that people who are at most risk of getting or the people who are most risk can get their appointments faster, while the people who don't need them aren't clogging up the system. So this can result in life-saving early detection, as we all can kind of deduce there, which is a wonderful, wonderful use of AI. And these sorts of things are just going to continue in the future as these algorithms continue to develop, and hopefully hospitals will continue to adopt these technologies. So this was just like a year ago, by the way. I think it was around May. I don't remember the exact month, but so that's cool for sure. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about before we move on to some examples are different like levels of AI. And that's not like an official term. That's just kind of the way I'm describing these categories of AI. Because you have like I don't want to call it the lowest level, but it's called artificial narrow intelligence, or ANI. And this classification is the only real level that's currently in existence, because it basically means AI performing narrow or specific tasks. So they're designed to do very specific niche things. For example, a self-driving car isn't going to give you breast cancer screening recommendations because it was designed to be a self-driving car, and vice versa, right? So a breast screening recommendation isn't going to also drive your car, at least not yet. Artificial general intelligence, which is kind of the subject of Pedro Domingos's book, The Master Algorithm, but also this isn't his exclusive idea. This is many people have discussed AGI, but this is the idea of an AI that can perform virtually any intellectual task that a human can. Now, this does not technically exist yet. There are some people who say that algorithms that they're working on either is or could be AGI, but they were dismissed by their peers for making such broad sweeping statements. However, regardless of whether those people are true or accurate or not, we are making strides towards it. So that leaves the question, what is the last category? Artificial superintelligence, or ASI. And the best analogy would be Skynet from Terminator, but not actually. I'm just kidding. Only kind of, though, because ASI in theory are algorithms that have achieved what's known as singularity. And this is as technical as the conversation is going to get, so don't worry. But the term of singularity is borrowed from the gravitational singularity of a black hole, and essentially refers to a situation in which AI becomes self-regulating and self-governing. So when an AI can do any intellectual task that a human can, an AGI, and it can improve itself at will, an ASI, an explosion of near instantaneous self-improvements will begin in an endless cycle, far surpassing human intelligence, because AI doesn't sleep, it doesn't eat, it just churns out. It's a program, right? So it just keeps going. So when it can do anything we can, and it can self-improve, it's going to just start firing it off and doing it nonstop. So that's a scary possibility, because we don't know what that would end in, essentially. So
Julian, let me ask you this question. Do you think that data from Star Trek would qualify as artificial superintelligence?
I am actually not familiar with Star Trek, unfortunately, so I can't comment. But it is one of the franchises I've wanted to get into. So I don't actually know, but
I mean, because when you say Skynet, I mean, that one's pretty scary, you know.
I know, yeah, it was meant to be
it
was meant to be a shock factor. But the reason I bring it up is because, and I'll read the rest of what I have there, but at the bottom there, I said, any chance of ASI resulting in the end of humanity means we should not pursue it, at least in my personal opinion, and in many people's opinions who are developing AI, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And if there's even a less than 0.0001% that the AI could go rogue and do something like that, is it really worth the benefit? Like, why shouldn't we just stop at AGI where it's controlled in different silos? But to drive the idea home further, here's a thought experiment, which is courtesy of Dr. Scott Garrigan, professor emeritus at Lehigh, who was one of the people who got me kind of on this path of research with AI. He said, and I don't know if this is original to him, but it's where I originally heard it. So he said, imagine if mice had created humans to help them get more cheese. With our levels of intelligence and ability, how would the mice know what we would choose to do after being created? How could they control us? So what if we stopped helping them get cheese and choose to do something else? So it's the exact same concern here that ASI offers, or rather is potentially a situation that it could happen. So again, it's scary, but it doesn't necessarily spell the end of humanity either. But it would either way, whether it's full on like Terminator Skynet level, which is, again, probably not realistic. I was just being facetious and having fun with it. But even if it didn't, it would definitely spell the end of current way of life and current society and capitalist society, because we as humans would not be able to keep up with the advancements, which would cause societal chaos at least in the short term. People worry about AI replacing jobs, and while there will be some areas of that's been happening since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, so that's not anything new. But an ASI would ramp that up to like the nth degree. So there's definitely a propensity for major societal disruptions should this type of technology be developed. If it's any consolation, there's also discussions of people not actually believing that this technology is even possible. But they also said that about the technologies that we have today. So I don't really think that that is always the best argument. But on that fun, happy, exciting note, we'll go through some more fun and interactive examples of how AI is used currently and things that you could potentially do with it. So before I get into the specifics, there's one more definition I want to throw at you, and that's generative AI. You all may have already heard of this, especially over the last year, but put simply, generative AI is any algorithm that creates something unique on demand. So this can be text, images, videos, music, etc., which has both a lot of promise, but a lot of concern for fake things coming out. So we're all in the next few years and starting today have to be really vigilant about verifying the authenticity of things that we are seeing on social media. Literally just this morning, I saw a news article saying that there's this image of some kind. I didn't actually click on the article, so I'm just reciting a headline here, but there was an image of the Pentagon that is floating around right now on social media where there's like a big crater or like some kind of damage near it that is being floated around as being legitimate when it was generated by AI, and it actually had an impact on the stock market. So we really need to make sure that we are checking sources and making sure that things that we're seeing are legitimate, or videos of prominent political figures, whatever your stance is. It's really important to be making sure that things that we're looking at are legit before we share them and talk about them. So because generative AI, there's going to be so much of it. We're going to have so many political actors using these generative tools to make things, to get people to believe certain things that they would want them to believe. So keep that in mind. But the number one generative AI algorithm that you've probably heard by now is ChatGPT. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But as a concept, while generative AI is cool, they have the capacity to completely break traditional educational assessments as they stand today. And we'll again talk about this again in the future. But students right now could use generative AI to obtain free on-demand ghostwriting, which is a form of plagiarism where students submit uniquely written work that is not their own, bypassing plagiarism detection systems. And I'll touch on that again at the very end. But there are also many positive uses for generative AI, both on the inside and outside of the classroom. And again, we'll go through some stuff there. But the cat is already out of the bag, so it's kind of a situation where we might as well just embrace it and figure out how to best utilize these tools and work around them. So again, we'll go through that at the end. But first, I want to briefly touch on something that I did about a year ago, I think it was. Yeah, mid 2022. So this was pre-ChatGPT. There were still other generative AI algorithms out there. In fact, there have been generative algorithms as far back as, I think, 2015, I want to say, maybe even earlier. This isn't on the slide, but there was an algorithm that disrupted the academic world. It was called SciGen, and essentially it was capable of generating fully like academic papers, like things that you would see in journals. And the scientists who developed it actually got their papers submitted to many different journals just to prove a point. But then once it was unleashed, other people got hold of the code and started to use it to nefariously get published illegitimately. So, I mean, there have been studies that I think found and then recommended to have removed like 150 to 200 different papers that were found to have been generated with SciGen. So this isn't new, is my point. And so what I did last year with a freely available algorithm that any of you could Google and play with, there's videos, YouTube tutorials, you don't have to be a coder, that you can follow the steps. It's called GPT Neo. Now, GPT, by the way, because you see that in so many different terms, stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So it's just a classification or a categorization, which is why you see it in all the names. So my goal at the time was to generate a podcast intro written with my personal style of writing, to the point that it would be hard to tell whether I wrote it or not. So I trained the algorithm on over 200 pages of my writing and asked it one simple prompt: what can we learn from artificial intelligence? And so this is not the full response. This is just a snippet of it. But the part that I want to especially drive home is the part that's bolded. In a recent article, Dr. Michael Schaefer of the University of California describes that natural science behind artificial intelligence and the ways in which it might be used by the US government. Dr. Schaefer is a professor of artificial intelligence at Caltech and is one of the most influential scientists in the field. He's published over 600 peer-reviewed articles on artificial intelligence and AI-related topics. Now, I highlighted that section because that's exactly the kind of way I would have written that. Every time I would ever write a script, I would always talk about some prominent figure. It would usually be associated with some kind of university. So I read that and laughed because it was kind of exactly how I would have written it, like I said. But what's more interesting is that that person does not exist. They made up an entirely like fictional entity to put in there and gave them a backstory and where they worked and what they did and what they specialized in. The funny thing is then the algorithm went on to kind of talk about like I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory, but like a secret project that the US was working on that, again, sounded totally believable. But so one of the things that I did after doing this was I asked 3 different image generator algorithms to draw Dr. Michael Schaefer of the University of California, because I wanted to see just how far we could push this. So again, another classification of generative AI is the ability to generate images on demand. So I went to 3 different places: Crayon, which is one of my favorite tools to generate fake images with, because it gives you a little 9x9 grid, and sometimes it comes up with some ridiculous stuff. And then we have Deep AI, and then we have PixArt. So all of these are what it said when I gave it the same exact prompt. So it's pretty interesting. But do you notice anything else specific about this? So look again. And this is something I noticed. One, there's 2 things, but the first is that this is the perfect example of bias in AI. We haven't talked about bias yet, but it's a really important topic to discuss, especially within the scope of education. So what do I mean by bias? Look at all the images of humans on here. I mean, some of them aren't human, but all of these are older white males, right? So that is an example of bias. I typed in Dr. blah, 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 and it assumed that I was talking about an older white male. So that is an unfortunate reality that we have to work around and consider when we are talking about large data sets. And it's most commonly an issue with smaller data sets, but it's still prevalent even in big data scenarios. So it naturally assumed that that's the type of person I was talking about, when we all know that that's not a requirement to be a doctor, right? So definitely something to keep in mind to think about it. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the future. Not just in the future, but I mean today. The second thing is, if you notice on the one image, is that a copyright infringement situation? Like, is that a legitimate signature? Or did the AI have such an impressive attention to detail that it added a fake signature? Now, I can't make out what that actually says, but there is a very prominent concern where generative AI has such a big plethora of stuff to draw from that sometimes it includes copyrighted images, or copyrighted content, or stuff from a book, that sort of thing. So that's another concern that we have to keep in mind, especially if we're using generative algorithms like ChatGPT to make course content for our work, or literally anything. Is you might accidentally, you might be under the impression that all of these are unique and original pieces of work. Sometimes the wires get crossed, and sometimes it's not always original. So it's another thing to keep in mind. Another fun phenomenon, if you've ever heard of, this is just a side tangent, if you ever hear the term uncanny valley, look at that guy's wrist right there. Isn't that weird? It's like his sleeve is going into his hand. So uncanny valley essentially means something that looks like it's supposed to be real or human, but it's off and you just can't tell why until you look a little bit closer. So that's one example. You see it in everybody in one way or another, especially the one that kind of looks like a mixture of Bob Odenkirk and Chris Evans. But either way, it's a fun little side snippet. Oh, sorry, I got a notification here. I don't know if it's popping up for you guys, but I don't see it. So I'm just going to keep going. So real quick, oh, there it is. So real quick, your turn, enter in the chat, or you can even just shout out. It's fine. What should we make? I'm just going to pick one response, but I want to type something into all three of these algorithms. And while it's generating them, I'm going to move them on the side in case it's not appropriate. But we're going to continue on. But first, type in the chat for a little bit. Come up with something. Can be a person. It could be a thing. Literally get creative. It could be, I don't know, SpongeBob eating popcorn on the moon. Like, it doesn't matter. Come up with something, and then, Holly, you can pick your favorite and just tell me one, or we can do that. So while you are all typing, I'm going to open these up. And then,
we have one so far.
That's fine. First come, first serve is fine too.
Okay, it's Lehigh, and this is good. Lehigh's Mountain Hawk Clutch mascot.
Oh, that is a good one. Okay. I'm curious to know if it'll know that. So Lehigh's Mountain Hawk Clutch mascot. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to tell it to draw. Oh, wait, let me see what settings did I check. I'm actually going to change that and refresh this, because there are different settings. You can do drawings, art, photos. So I'm going to go with the drawing on this one to see what it does. There we go. So I'm going to move that over here as well. I'm also going to, as I do this, I'm going to move these to my other browser, just in the off chance that, well, I didn't want to show everything on my calendar. Just on the off chance that something, come on, computer, don't do this to me. There we go. On the off chance that something bad were to be generated, which isn't traditionally what would happen, but you never know. So I just want to make sure that I'm not broadcasting something inappropriate.
Absolutely.
Oh, I mistyped mascot. Apparently there's only one T. Whoops. Oh, well. So let's say digital art. Let's see if there's any other categories on here that we want. That's probably good. We're not looking for anything amazing here. Generate images. Move that over here. And then the last one just has a picture of a person there right away, because these are different ways that you can have it emulate styles of. And so for the person that I had done, the doctor, whatever, I picked that one because it was more photorealistic. So since we're talking about an animal, wow, aminal, I'm going to go with that one. So we'll say generate. So yeah, I'm going to move these over to my other monitor. We're going to continue on while those think. And then let's talk about this. Oh, wow, that one's creepy. That just came up. Sorry, I got distracted by the one that came up. Anyway, so we'll talk about ChatGPT now while we wait a little bit. So there are some examples, and we'll actually go through each of them, but there's some examples of what ChatGPT can do that you could do with it. And we'll go through all of these right now. And I think I put these, should have left it in the speaker notes thing. So that way I don't have to type them all out. So this is actually ChatGPT. And you can do like really anything that you could come up with creatively. Like it can give you list recommendations. It can help you with writing. It can help you with programming. It can help you with answers to questions that you might have, or things that you might Google that, where Google isn't always necessarily right. Those types of things. So there's really no end to it. So the first one is, what are some streaming recommendations for fans of Mike Flanagan? I don't know if any of you are familiar with his work. I'm a fan. Essentially, it's a niche kind of thing. It's like horror without all the blood and gore. So let's say I wanted more of his work and stuff on Netflix. So let's see what it says. So far, this is just his stuff. Okay, there we go. There's one that's not his, I don't think. Oh, wait, no, he directed that one. Yeah, so right now it's just telling me, and that's the thing, sometimes it's hit or miss, right? So I was asking it for other recommendations that he didn't create, but it's going with stuff that he did. So that's probably also how I worded it. And I could say stop, right? And I could say, I actually meant recommendations for things that didn't involve Mike Flanagan. Could you try again? And we'll see if it does. See, and then it's apologies for the misunderstanding. So now it's going through a list of things that he wasn't involved with. Stranger Things is a good analogy. So I'm not going to go through everything, but you can see how it's very personalized, and you can have a conversation with an intelligent entity and it remembers your previous answers. So let me see. Let me go to the next one where I could
Julian,
say, yes.
can you verify which Mike Flanagan you're speaking of? Because somebody thought you were talking about the pitcher from the Orioles.
Oh, I am talking about not that person. I don't think. I didn't realize there was a second one. So yeah, Mike Flanagan is a director and a writer of a TV series is who I'm referring to. So not that person.
Thank
I'm
you.
also, yeah, no problem. I'm also seeing the time, so I'm going to keep moving on actually without going the rest of these examples. But it could also write podcast intros. It can answer physics questions. I have a friend who's a teacher at the Buckley School in Moore Park Community College, and it can answer very complicated questions that he recommended. It can do an essay summarizing The Great Gatsby, etc. So I'll pull it back the things that it recommended here. Yeah, okay, so these all I think are appropriate. So yeah, so Lehigh's Mountain Hawk clutch mascot. So it didn't know, the sports mascot, but it identified Mountain Hawk at least, right? So that's kind of close. And then let's see what this one came up with. That one tried. You can kind of see the Lehigh logo in there. This is what I kind of mean about Uncanny Valley. And then this one where it's like a really messed up amalgamation of the Lehigh logo. And then that, I don't know what that is, but that one looks like it could kind of be clutch. So this is where you get some weird things when you start talking about niche stuff. So, and then that one's way off. That's not clutch at all, but it tried. So not the best example of a prompt. However, it's still, you can see how it tried. And I think if we had done things that were maybe more prominent in popular media, it would have had a better success rate. But I could have asked it to try again. And those are all tools that you're free to try and play with. So real quick, I'm going to try to breeze through this last section and offer a couple minutes of question or Q&A. But so AI in education. So I'm not going to read these all verbatim because I only have a few minutes left. But before we talk about those use cases, I want to talk about the learner-centered ideology. And essentially, you can summarize the learner-centered ideology by just thinking about Montessori schools. So it's a style of learning. It's one of the 4 prominent theories of modern curriculum design that is focused on the learner. So it's personalized learning. What do you want to specifically learn? Tracks that you're interested in, because it draws out more intrinsic motivation from the learner. So the problem is that learner-centered classrooms have been kind of a unicorn in the real world, because a lot of people try to do it, but it just takes so much time and energy that instructors are unable to do it, because it requires such a personalized handholding with every single student and what their interests are, and having a knowledge of all of that to be able to help them forward. It's near impossible to do. And the thing is, teachers favor this model. They do like it when it actually works. It just puts such a high demand on them. So, and it's higher cost and results in lower student to teacher ratios, all sorts of things. But the students also prefer it. One study found that learner-centered classrooms remarkably motivated the students, improved their learning strategies, enhanced their academic performance. So this is all where AI can help. And I am working on an article right now to publish an EDUCAUSE on this topic of AI and the learner-centered classroom. I don't know if it'll actually be published, but we'll see. So these are some areas in which AI can be applied to education with a learner-centered lens specifically. And this first one, profiling and prediction, doesn't actually have any impact on the learner-centered classroom, but the other 2 can. So the 3 primary categories, and by the way, these are according to systematic reviews, which is basically a type of academic study that has a lot of different studies within it. It evaluates kind of what's out there in the field of academia and then summarizes what it's found. So these categories are according to 2 different systematic reviews plus another study. So The first category, profiling and prediction. Essentially, what this category does is it takes big data about students, and then it tries to use that information to categorize and group them, predict their future behavior within the context of education. And the ultimate goal is always to identify at-risk students who may be silently struggling, and then offer support and services to help them continue with their education. Now, we talk about bias before. This is where bias really comes into play in education, because you have to be really careful about what your data sets say. For example, Lehigh's data set would be very different from the data set of Northampton Community College due to socioeconomic factors and type of student attendees, and you pick a reason. There's a variable there that might cause bias. So bias is not guaranteed, but it should always be considered, even when we're trying to do positive things with the tools. So it's very important to keep this in mind when we're working with the outputs of different types of algorithms. The second category would be intelligent tutoring systems. And at a broad stroke, what this is that it can offer students on-demand, direct, personalized support, meeting them where they are intellectually on a topic while giving consideration to their personalized learning interests. So the most common example would be a chatbot. ChatGPT technically is a chatbot, but it's not a traditional one. Something more like IBM's Watson Assistant would be a traditional chatbot. But chatbots can be used for teaching and reinforcing course material through natural conversation, asking a question during a lecture without fear of disrupting a class or looking stupid or whatever you would want to, prohibit a student from asking questions for. It can do other things as well, but the point is that these types of technologies free up instructor time, allowing them to provide more direct support and personalized one-on-one time with their students. And then there's assessment and evaluation, which one of the main areas is automated feedback, where a student can submit a paper and can get instantaneous feedback on things like APA, MLA formatting and citations, their grammar, their sentence structure, academic tone, and all of that can be delivered to the student instantaneously without the student or the teacher ever having to look at it. And then when the teacher actually goes to review that paper, they can see all those comments already on there. So they know they don't have to waste their time on the semantics. They can get to the personalized heart of the paper and really help the student further their work. So that's another great example. There's also automatic grading. I won't get into that. And then there's generative AI as a writing tool like ChatGPT, which can be used for good in the classroom, can help you with some proofreading, do the same kind of automated feedback sort of thing. But I have like a minute left, so I'm not going to go into that. This is one of the last slides. Plagiarism, we already kind of talked about it, so I won't drive it home any further, but this is something I'm hoping to research this coming fall. In the program, I'm looking to kind of gain instructor perceptions about how to utilize ChatGPT in the classroom and other algorithms, and what their beliefs are and how we can use it as a tool and hit the topic of plagiarism head on, and acknowledge that we know that it's there and talk about prevention methods and that sort of thing. So if you want more, there's a really good Netflix docuseries by the Robert Downey Jr. He was the producer and host of it. It was from 2019 to 2020, so it's not going to talk about ChatGPT. I think it also has Pedro Domingos in it. But it's an easy watch, it's beginner friendly, and it's just really interesting. So I highly recommend it. It's called The Age of AI. So thank you. I would love your feedback. I didn't give a whole lot of time because it's now 9:45. So I apologize for being long-winded, but you can email me, julian@lehigh.edu, if you have questions, want to exchange ideas, or you want to tell me how horrible this presentation was, that's fine. And I don't know if there are any questions we can try to speed run through.
Anybody have questions? You can raise your hand or put them in the chat. Julian, you're getting a lot of excellent presentations. It was fantastic. Thank yous.
Awesome.
Some hand clapping. It was a very good presentation. It's enjoyable.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. So. Okay, well.
No questions. Thank you everyone for joining today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations if you're able to join some, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks everyone. Take care.